Close your eyes and let the room around you dissolve. Let the solid walls turn to mist and the electric light fade into the soft grey gloom of a medieval twilight. We are drifting back, far back, floating over the rolling green fields of France, but the air here does not smell of lavender or baking bread. It smells of wet iron, trampled mud, and the sharp, metallic tang of old fear. Can you hear it? The wind rustling through the leaves of ancient oaks, and beneath it, a sound that has haunted the dreams of French children for 3 generations, the deep, rhythmic thrum of thousands of bar strings being drawn in unison. Before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know your city and local time in the comments so we can see where everyone is listening from. We are standing now at the edge of a memory, a dark and heavy thing that sits upon the soul of a kingdom like a stone on a tomb. To understand the story of Patay, the day the world turned upside down, we must first understand the shadow that came before it, the long, terrifying twilight of French defeat that we call the 100 Years' War. It is early in the year 1429, and for the people of France, hope is not a thing with feathers. It is a ghost that hasn't been seen in decades. For nearly a century, the English have been the masters of the battlefield, not because they are more numerous or because they are richer, but because they possess a terrible rhythmic secret, the longbow. Imagine the English army not as a chaotic mob, but as a machine, a cold wooden engine of destruction that has ground the flower of French chivalry into the mud, time and time again. The names of the defeats are etched into the minds of the French nobility like scars: Crécy, Poitiers, and the darkest of them all, Agincourt. Agincourt. Even 14 years later, the name makes men shudder. It was there that the myth of English invincibility was forged in blood and rain. The French, glorious in their silver plate armour, riding magnificent destriers, had charged with all the pomp and romance of an old song, only to be met by the peasant archers of England. These were not knights, they were common men, yeomen with dirt under their fingernails and bad teeth, but in their hands they held the power of lightning. They planted sharp wooden stakes in the ground, a simple fence of death, and waited. When the French charged, the sky turned black with arrows. It was said that the cloth-yard shaft, an arrow 3 feet long, could punch through the finest Milanese steel as if it were parchment. Historians still argue whether it was the sheer kinetic force of the bodkin arrowheads piercing the plate that won these battles, or simply the chaos of terrified horses maddened by the stinging hail, churning the mud into a trap no man could escape. But the result was always the same: a pile of dead French aristocrats and an English army that had barely moved a muscle. This repetition created a psychological cage. By 1429, the French commanders are paralysed by a deep instinctual dread. They believe, with the heavy certainty of religious dogma, that if the English have time to form their lines, if they have time to plant those wicked stakes and draw their bows, they cannot be beaten. It is a law of nature, like gravity or the rising sun. To fight the English in the open field is to commit suicide. And so the war has become a slow, agonizing siege, a game of hiding behind walls, while the English wolves prowl the countryside, taking what they want, burning what they cannot carry, and drinking an impressive amount of French wine in the process. War is thirsty work, after all, and the English have always appreciated a good vintage, especially when it's free. The English commanders, men like the Earl of Salisbury and the fearsome Lord Talbot, walk with the swagger of giants. They know they are feared. They know that when their banners appear on the horizon, the French hearts sink. It is a powerful weapon, this reputation. It wins battles before the first sword is drawn. But history is a strange narrator. It loves to lull us into thinking the pattern is permanent just before it snaps the thread. The English are comfortable in their supremacy. They have their system, their tactical doctrine, as we might call it today. It is slow, it is defensive, and it is devastatingly effective. They march, they halt, they choose a spot with a nice hedge or a swamp on the flanks, they dig in, and they dare the French to come and die. It is a strategy of patience. But the year 1429 is bringing a new energy, a strange frantic vibration that feels like a storm gathering just below the horizon. The winter has been hard, the land is scarred, and the Dauphin, the uncrowned King Charles VII, hides in his castle south of the Loire River, a king of shadows and doubts. He is a man who seems to be waiting for a sign, or perhaps just waiting for the end. The English occupy Paris. They occupy the north. They are pushing south, tightening the noose around the city of Orléans, the last great bastion protecting the southern heartlands. If Orléans falls, the gateway is open, and the English tide will flood the rest of France, washing away the Valois dynasty forever. It is a moment of supreme tension, though it is quiet. It is the silence of a held breath. Can you feel the humidity of the coming spring? The ground is thawing, turning the thick, clinging clay of the Loire Valley into a paste that sucks at boots and hooves. It is in this mud that the fate of nations is written. The English soldier, sitting by his campfire sharpening his arrows, feels secure. He trusts his bow. He trusts his commanders. He trusts the stupidity of the French. He does not know that the script has been rewritten while he slept. He does not know that a variable has entered the equation that makes no sense to his pragmatic mind. A variable that speaks of voices, of saints, and of a destiny that has nothing to do with tactics or stakes. The myth of Agincourt is a heavy shield, but shields can be heavy enough to crush the man beneath them. And the French, they are tired, they are humiliated. But there is a dangerous thing about humiliation. Eventually, it burns away the fear and leaves only a cold, hard anger. Or perhaps something even more dangerous, a desperate need to believe in magic because reality has become too grim to bear. We hover here, in this moment of suspension, watching the campfires flicker across the darkened map of France. The board is set. The pieces are moving. The old lions of England are confident, perhaps a little too fat on victory, while the battered roosters of France are looking at the sunrise and wondering if they dare to crow one last time. The wind is changing direction, shifting from the cold north to a warmer, wilder south. And on that wind, riding invisible currents, comes the sound of a girl's voice and the thunder of hooves that will not wait, that will not pause, that will not respect the old rules of the game. The stage is set for Patay, but the road there leads first through the impossible. The wind, which has blown cold and hard from the north for so long, begins to swirl and eddy, catching the scent of wild lilies and damp river reeds along the banks of the Loire. It is May now, the month of Mary, the month of rebirth, and the air is thick with a strange, impossible energy that no one can quite name. The English siege of Orléans, that iron ring that was meant to strangle France, has shattered, not with a whimper, but with a roar that echoes all the way to the courts of Europe. It happened so fast that the chroniclers can barely keep their ink from smotching on the parchment. Into this world of weary soldiers and cynical captains steps a figure who should not exist in the brutal calculus of war. A 17-year-old peasant girl from Domremy, claiming to speak with the voices of angels. To the English, She is a witch, a creature of the devil sent to confuse good Christian men. To the French, she is the maid, La Pucelle, a miracle wrapped in white armour. But strip away the theology for a moment and look at the soldiers. Look at the faces of the French men-at-arms who have spent their entire adult lives learning how to lose. They are looking at this girl, this child who rides a horse as if she were born in the saddle, and for the first time in forever, their chests are swelling with something other than panic. She does not know the rules of their defeat. She does not know that Englishmen are invincible. She simply tells them to fight. And in her ignorance of their fear, she destroys it. The siege of Orléans breaks in early May, a week of furious, frantic combat that stuns both sides. The English, commanded by the Earl of Suffolk and the redoubtable Lord Talbot, are forced to retreat, leaving their forts burning and their reputation singed. It is a moment of profound psychological rupture. Imagine the confusion in the English camp. These are men who believe God is English, or at least has a very strong preference for English longbows, and now they are running from a girl who prefers a banner to a sword. It is enough to make a veteran sergeant question his sanity, or at least his choice of career. But the relief of Orléans is only the beginning of the shift. The French commanders, the gentle Duke of Alençon and the pragmatic Jean de Dunois, the bastard of Orléans, are men of their time. Their instinct, honed by decades of caution, is to pause. They have won a great victory. Surely the prudent thing is to rest, to consolidate, to perhaps write a few triumphant letters and drink some excellent wine while waiting for the English to regroup. That is how the game is played. You win a hand, you count your winnings, but the maid will have none of it. She is a creature of movement, a spark that demands to become a fire. She urges them to the Loire campaign, a swift, brutal clearing of the river valley. "We must go to Rheims," she insists, pointing to the coronation city deep in enemy territory. The captains look at maps. She looks at the horizon, and incredibly, they listen. The army begins to move, not with the sluggish, heavy steps of a defeated force, but with a new terrifying lightness. They march to Jargeau, a town held by the English just east of Orléans. The assault is bloody. At one point, Joan is struck by a stone cannonball that smashes against her helmet, knocking her to the ground, a moment that would have ended the career of most soldiers and certainly provided a good excuse to go home. Instead, she shakes her head, stands up, and shouts for the ladders to be raised. The men see this. They see her mortality and her refusal to acknowledge it. And they surge forward like a tide that has finally found the moon. Jargeau falls. The Earl of Suffolk is captured. It is said that when Suffolk surrendered, he demanded to be captured by a knight to preserve his dignity, a touch of aristocratic absurdity in the middle of a slaughter that feels almost charming in its stubbornness. The French army is now a shark in the water, smelling blood. They move west, sweeping along the Loire. Historians still argue whether this aggressive strategy was truly Joan's tactical genius, or if she simply provided the spiritual cover for aggressive captains like La Hire and Alençon to finally do what they had always wanted to do but dared not. Did she lead the army, or did she simply unite it? Perhaps the distinction matters only to scholars. To the English soldier watching the dust clouds rise in the distance, the result is the same. The goddams, as the French call the English, noting their favourite vocabulary word, are falling back. They are not routed, not yet. They are regrouping, pulling their garrisons from the smaller towns, trying to coalesce into that familiar, deadly block of iron and yew that has served them so well. But the rhythm is off. The French are moving too fast. They are not giving the English time to breathe, to dig, to plant those terrible stakes. The psychological landscape of the war has inverted. The French are no longer fighting to survive, they are fighting to win. And the English are no longer fighting to conquer, they are fighting to hold on to what they stole. It is a subtle difference, but it changes the way a man holds his spear. It changes the way a scout watches the tree line. The summer heat begins to build, baking the roads, turning the armour into ovens, but the French march on, fueled by a strange, intoxicating cocktail of religious fervour and revenge. They take the bridge at Meung-sur-Loire, or at least they contest it, forcing the English to retreat into the castle. They bypass it and move to Beaugency. The speed is relentless. It is modern. It is unmedieval. Usually, a siege takes months. The French are doing it in days. The English commanders, Talbot and Fastolf, are seasoned professionals, men who know the business of war down to the last oat for the horses, but they are reacting, and in war, the man who reacts is already half defeated. They are trying to gather a relief force, marching down from Paris, trying to create a hammer to smash this new French anvil. But they are moving in a fog of uncertainty. They hear rumours of the witch, of huge numbers, of impossible feats. Fear is a contagion, and it travels faster than any courier. The English common soldier, the archer who was the king of the battlefield just months ago, is now looking over his shoulder. He is checking his bowstring a little too often. He is wondering why the saints seem to have switched sides. It is here, in this fluid, chaotic movement along the river, that the stage is truly set for Patay. The French are not just winning territory, they are dismantling the English mind. They are teaching themselves that the monster can bleed. And as the sun climbs higher in the June sky, gleaming off the water of the Loire and the polished steel of the knights, a collision is coming. Not a siege, not a skirmish, but a reckoning. The English are gathering their strength for one massive counterpunch, one great battle to restore the natural order of things, to put the French back in their place and silence the girl forever. They believe in their system. They believe that if they can just get the French to fight a proper battle on open ground, the old magic will return. They do not realise that they are walking into a world where the old magic has died, replaced by something fiercer, faster, and far less forgiving. The wind has shifted, and it is blowing a gale. Now we must leave the banks of the river for a moment and cast our gaze north, away from the frenetic energy of the Maid and her captains to the dry, dusty roads that lead down from Paris. Here, the world feels heavier, more ordered, more English. A great column of men is on the move, a serpent of steel and leather winding its way through the summer heat of the Beauce. This is the relief army, the hammer intended to smash the French uprising before it can truly begin. At its head ride two men who are not just soldiers, but living legends, the twin pillars of English authority in France. To understand why Patay happens the way it does, you must understand the friction between these two souls, for an army is often just the extended shadow of its commanders. First, there is John Talbot, the Earl of Shrewsbury. If war had a face, it would look like Talbot. He is a man carved from old oak and scarred iron, a terrifying figure known across France simply as Le Roi Talbot, King Talbot. Mothers in the French countryside threaten their unruly children not with the bogeyman, but with the whisper that Talbot is coming. He is aggressive, relentless, and possessed of a physical courage that borders on madness. He believes in the sword, in the charge, in the sheer brute force of English will. For Talbot, the recent defeats at Orléans and Jargeau are not disasters. They are insults, personal insults. He rides with a scowl that could curdle milk, his eyes fixed on the southern horizon, eager to find the French, plant his boots in the mud, and remind them who owns this kingdom. Riding beside him, or perhaps slightly behind, depending on the argument of the day, is Sir John Fastolf. If Talbot is the sword, Fastolf is the shield. He is a veteran of Agincourt, a man of logistics, prudence, and calculation. He is wealthy, careful, and deeply respected for his ability to manage the boring, unromantic reality of war, supply lines, pay chests, and the quality of arrows. History has been unkind to Fastolf, twisting his name and character into Shakespeare's cowardly buffoon Falstaff, a fat knight who prefers sack to battle. But the real Fastolf is nothing like that. He is a cold, hard professional who knows that a dead hero is of no use to the King of England. And right now, Sir John Fastolf is worried. He looks at the reports coming from the south, reports of towns falling in days, of French soldiers fighting with the fervour of zealots, and he smells a trap. He argues that they should hold back, let the French exhaust themselves against the remaining garrisons, and wait for even more reinforcements from England. We are the last field army, he seems to say with every cautious glance at the map. If we break, England breaks. Talbot, naturally, finds this talk of caution to be nearly treasonous. To him, the French are still the French, flighty, prone to panic, and terrified of the longbow. He cannot conceive that the fundamental nature of his enemy has changed. He pushes the pace. The army marches on, a mix of hardened veterans and fresh recruits, pulled from the garrisons of Normandy. Listen to the sound of them. It is a rhythmic, hypnotic clanking, the music of the march. Thousands of feet tramping on hard-packed dirt. The jingling of harness bells. The creak of wagon wheels laden with salted beef and barrels of arrows. The heat is beginning to rise. That thick, breathless humidity of central France in June that sticks the linen undergarments to the skin and makes the padded jacks feel like wool blankets in a sauna. The English archers, the famous yeomen, march with their bows unstrung and confident. They carry their lives in their belts, a sheaf of 24 arrows, a heavy maul for driving stakes, and a dagger for the grim work of finishing off fallen knights. They are not afraid, not really. They have heard the rumours of the witch, yes, and they cross themselves a little more frequently than usual, perhaps muttering a quick prayer to St. George or St. Crispin. But they are surrounded by their mates, and there is a comfort in the herd. They joke about the French wine they will drink when this is over, and they complain with the timeless privilege of soldiers everywhere about the food. English rations have not improved much in 100 years. Hardtack and dried peas are fueling this empire, which perhaps explains why they are always so eager to conquer provinces known for their cuisine. But beneath the banter, there is a tension that wasn't there a year ago. The veterans of Agincourt are old men now, grey-bearded and stiff-jointed, telling stories that sound increasingly like fairy tales to the young recruits. They speak of French knights who rode blindly into the mud, who waited politely to be shot. But the news from Jargeau is different. The French didn't wait. They climbed walls. They fought hand to hand. The tactical doctrine is fraying at the edges. Talbot and Fastolf moved their force towards Janville, intending to link up with the English garrisons along the Loire at Meung and Beaugency. It is a rescue mission. They know that if they can unite their forces, they will have an army of perhaps 5,000 or 6,000 men, enough in their minds to crush any French force in the open field. They just need to get there. They need to choose the ground. They need to set the board. The tragedy of the English command in this moment is a tragedy of blindness. They are operating on a delay. Their intelligence is slow, moving at the speed of a tired horse, while the French are moving at the speed of a rumour. Talbot believes he is hunting a fox, unaware that he is walking into the path of a wolf. Historians still debate the exact size of this English relief force, with numbers ranging wildly in the chronicles from a modest 2,000 to an improbable 10,000. But most modern scholars settle on a corps of elite troops heavily weighted towards archers. It is a specialised tool designed for a specific job, defensive slaughter. As they march south, passing through villages that bolt their doors and shutter their windows, the English are a terrifying sight, a moving forest of pikes and yew-staves, but they are also rigid. They are a castle trying to move on legs. They require time to deploy, time to think, time to establish the harrison, the hedgehog formation of stakes that protects the archers from cavalry. Without that time, they are just men in cloth jackets holding sticks. The sun beats down, the dust rises in choking clouds, coating the sweaty faces of the men in a fine grey powder, making them look like ghosts before they are even dead. Talbot rides at the front, his standard snapping in the wind. The Talbot dog, a symbol of loyalty and ferocity. He is eager to reach the river. He wants to see the towers of Beaugency. He wants to look the maid in the eye and see if she bleeds. Fastolf rides with him, scanning the tree lines, checking the scouts, worrying about the flanks. He senses that the air has changed, that the countryside itself has become hostile in a way it never was before. The peasants are watching them, not with the usual bovine submission, but with a strange quiet intent. The birds seem to have gone silent. The very earth of France seems to be holding its breath, waiting for the moment when the rhythm of the march will be broken by the thunder of a new reality. They press on, the lions of England, marching toward the river, toward the bridge, toward a destiny that is already rushing north to meet them. We drift now along the currents of the Loire, moving downstream with the lazy, brown water that has witnessed the rise and fall of Rome, the prayers of monks, and the blood of kings. It is mid-June, the 15th day, to be precise, and the river is swollen with late spring rains, a muscular, churning barrier that divides the kingdom in two. On the northern bank sits the town of Meung-sur-Loire, a sturdy, serious place dominated by a castle that frowns down upon the water with the arrogance of stone. For years, this has been an English kennel, a place where the lions of Albion rest their paws and sharpen their claws. The bridge here is the quay, a narrow stone spine arching over the water, the only way for an army to cross without getting wet feet and ruined bowstrings. Controlling the bridge means controlling the movement of the war, and the English know it. They have fortified the bridgehead on the southern bank with a formidable tower, a gatehouse of thick masonry and iron-studded wood, garrisoned by men who have no intention of leaving. But look south, look at the road leading up to the river. A cloud of dust is approaching, not the slow, heavy dust of a baggage train, but the frantic, swirling dust of an army that is running. The French have arrived. They spill out of the tree line like water from a broken dam. A riot of colours, the blue and gold of the lilies, the red of the oriflamme, and the white of the maid's banner, snapping in the wind like a captured dove. Leading them is the Duke of Alençon, a young man with a handsome face and a heart that is finally learning to beat in time with the drums of war. Beside him rides the maid, Joan, her armour shining so brightly it hurts the eyes. She does not look at the castle on the north bank. She looks at the bridge. She wants to cross. She wants to find the English army that is somewhere out there in the Beauce, hidden in the wheat fields. But first, they must break the lock on the door. The attack on the bridge at Meung is not a battle of manoeuvre. It is a brawl. It is a collision of physics and fury. The French infantry, emboldened by their success at Jargeau, rush the bridgehead with a ferocity that stuns the English defenders. Usually, a siege is a polite affair. You arrive, you dig trenches, you negotiate, you fire a few shots, and maybe, in a month or two, someone surrenders. But the French are not being polite today. They drag forward their culverins, primitive, ugly little cannons that look like iron pots and sound like the end of the world. Boom. A cloud of sulphurous smoke blooms white against the green willows. A stone ball, roughly hewn and heavy as a sin, smashes into the gatehouse. The masonry groans. Dust pours from the cracks like powdered sugar. Inside the fortification, the English archers are scrambling. This is Lord Scales's garrison, tough men, veterans who have held this bridge for years. They step to the arrow slits, those narrow vertical eyes in the stone, and loose their shafts. The arrows hiss through the air, biting into French shields, clattering against breastplates. But there are too many Frenchmen. They are swarming over the earthworks, shouting Saint-Denis and Montjoie, with voices that are raw with adrenaline. The fight becomes a claustrophobic nightmare of pushing and shoving in the narrow confines of the bridge approach. Men are pressed against the stone parapets. Some are pushed over the edge, falling with a terrifying splash into the swift, cold current of the Loire. The English longbowman, for all his terrifying skill, has never quite mastered the art of swimming in a gambeson and mail, a fact the river is all too happy to demonstrate with a wet, fatal indifference. The struggle for the bridgehead is brutal and short. The French are fighting with a new weapon, momentum. They do not stop to think about the danger. They simply climb over it. They scale the walls of the gatehouse, hacking at the wooden doors, firing crossbows at point-blank range into the murder holes. It is a storm of steel and sweat, and then the unthinkable happens. The English defence cracks. It does not shatter all at once, but it splinters. The gate gives way. The French pour in. The surviving English garrison retreats across the bridge to the safety of the castle on the north bank, pulling up the drawbridge, locking the gates, and staring down in disbelief at the swarm of French soldiers now occupying the southern bank. The bridge is taken. The crossing is secured. But here is where the story pivots, where the genius, or perhaps the madness, of the campaign reveals itself. By all the traditional rules of warfare, the French should now lay siege to the castle of Meung. You cannot leave an enemy fortress behind you. It is unsafe, it is unprofessional, it is simply not done. The commanders, Alençon and Dunois, look at the castle. They see the English banners waving defiantly from the keep. They know that taking it will require weeks of bombardment, mining and starvation. They look at Joan. She is already looking west, toward the next town, Beaugency. "We go," she says, and they go. They leave a small holding force to keep the English in Meung bottled up, to stare at the walls and make rude gestures. But the main army does not stop. They turn their backs on an unconquered castle and march on. Historians still argue whether this decision to bypass the main citadel of Meung was a stroke of strategic brilliance inspired by the maids' voices, or simply the impatience of a young duke who was terrified that if he stopped moving, his army's newfound courage would evaporate like morning mist. Was it a calculation that the English relief army was the real threat and the castles were merely distractions? Or was it a reckless gamble that paid off? Whatever the reason, the effect is electric. The French army is moving like a river in flood, flowing around obstacles rather than trying to erode them. They are buying time with space. They are trading the certainty of a siege for the uncertainty of the open road. The English inside the castle of Meung watch them go with a mixture of relief and confusion. They are safe behind their walls, yes, but they are also irrelevant. The war is moving away from them. They are stranded on an island of stone while the tide rushes past. Down on the riverbank, the French soldiers are laughing. They are drinking water from the Loire, washing the blood from their swords, and looking at the sun. It is late afternoon. The heat is beginning to soften, the light turning that rich golden honey colour that painters love. But there is no rest. The order comes down the line, to Beaugency. The men groan, adjust their packs, and shoulder their pikes. But they march. They march because, for the first time in their lives, they feel like they are chasing the English, not running from them. The sound of their boots fades into the distance, leaving Meung behind in a cloud of dust. The bridge sits silent now, scarred by the cannonballs, stained with dark patches that the flies are already finding. The water rushes underneath, indifferent to the change of ownership, whispering its secrets to the pilings. The French have tested the English resolve at Meung, and they have found it brittle. They have cracked the shell, but they have not eaten the nut. They are hungry for something bigger. Ahead of them lies Beaugency, another bridge, another town, another piece of the puzzle that must be solved before the English relief army arrives. The clock is ticking. Talbot is coming from the north. The French are racing from the east, and in the middle, unaware that they are about to become the anvil for this terrible hammer, the garrison of Beaugency waits, watching the road, wondering why the sky to the east is filled with the smoke of burning gunpowder. The sun dips lower. The shadows lengthen. The game of stones and water is over. The game of blood and open fields is about to begin. The walls of Beaugency are old, proud, and stubborn, rising above the Loire with the heavy, moss-covered dignity of a grandfather sleeping in a chair. But gunpowder is new, loud, and entirely lacking in respect for history. The French artillery has arrived, and the air is no longer sweet with river breeze. It is acrid with sulphur and thick with the terrifying rhythmic coughing of the bombards. Boom, crack, crumble. To be inside the town of Beaugency right now is to live inside a drum, being beaten by a giant. The English garrison, commanded by the capable Matthew Goff, huddles behind the parapets, watching the stone chips fly like hail. They are good soldiers, tough men, who have survived worse, but there is a special kind of despair that comes from being on the wrong side of a siege cannon. You cannot fight a cannonball with a sword. You can only pray it misses you, and in 1429, God seems to be listening to the French gunners with an alarming attentiveness. But the real drama at Beaugency is not the stone smashing against stone. It is the arrival of a ghost from the French political wilderness. As the siege lines tighten, a cloud of dust appears, not from the English north, but from the French south. It is Arthur de Richemont, the Constable of France. He is a man of immense power, a veteran of Agincourt who was pulled from under a pile of dead bodies. But he is also a man the Dauphin, King Charles, despises. He is technically an exile, forbidden to join the army. His arrival is a diplomatic grenade thrown into the middle of a war council. The Duke of Alençon, young and loyal to the king's grudges, wants to turn him away, perhaps even fight him. Imagine the absurdity. A French army pausing its war with the English to have a civil war in the parking lot. But Joan intervenes. She rides out to meet this scarred, terrifying veteran. "Ah, fair constable," she is said to have greeted him. "I did not send for you, but since you are here, you are welcome." It is a moment of profound pragmatism. She sees the heavy cavalry he brings, the grim-faced Breton men-at-arms, and she knows that to kill a lion, you need every spear you can hold. Historians still argue whether this reconciliation was a divine act of charity or a cold calculation by captains who knew the English relief army was days away and didn't care about the king's feelings when their necks were on the line. And the English are indeed coming. While the French batter the walls of Beaugency, the English relief force, Talbot and Fastolf, finally arrives at Meung, just a few miles downstream. They are too late to save the bridge at Meung, but they are just in time to ruin the French party at Beaugency. The situation is now a deadly sandwich. The French are besieging the town, and the English army is coming up behind them to besiege the besiegers. It is a classic military nightmare. Talbot, aggressive as ever, deploys his troops on the road between Meung and Beaugency. He sends heralds, shouting insults, daring the French to come out and fight like men in the open field. He wants Agincourt. He wants the French to turn around, see the English banners, panic, and charge foolishly into his waiting archers. It is the trap he has built his entire life around. But the French do not bite. They stay in their trenches. They ignore the insults. It must be infuriating for Talbot. Like a boxer taunting an opponent who is busy reading a book, the French commanders, advised by the Maid, know that time is on their side. They press the attack on the town even harder. Inside Beaugency, the garrison hears the trumpets of their rescuers. They see the banners of Talbot on the horizon, but they also look at their crumbling walls and the fanaticism of the French troops climbing the ladders. They do the math. They surrender. It is one of the most awkward moments of the war. The English garrison of Beaugency is granted safe conduct. They march out of the town fully armed, horses and baggage intact, walking right past the French army that just defeated them, and presumably giving an embarrassed wave to Talbot's relief force in the distance as they head for the safety of Normandy. Talbot is left standing on the road with his army, staring at a town that has just surrendered while he was watching. The door has been slammed in his face. The strategic purpose of his march, to save Beaugency, is gone. The English are now exposed, deep in enemy territory, with no base, no bridge, and a French army that is suddenly free to turn its full attention toward them. Fastolf, the prudent shield to Talbot's sword, looks at the situation and likely uses some very colourful 15th century profanity. "We must retreat," he urges. "The mission is failed. We go back to Janville. We regroup." Talbot rages. He wants to fight, but even he can see that assaulting a French army that is now comfortable inside the walls of Beaugency is suicide. Reluctantly, grinding his teeth, he orders the retreat. The English army turns around and begins to march north, back toward the sprawling plains of the Beauce. And this is the hinge of history. This is the moment where the script usually ends. The French have won the siege. The English have retreated. The standard procedure is for the French to cheer, drink all the wine in Beaugency, hold a massive thanksgiving, and go home to harvest their crops. That is how medieval warfare works. You take the castle, you let the enemy leave, you call it a good summer. But Joan and her captains, La Hire, Poton de Xaintrailles, and the newly arrived Richemont, are standing in the captured town wiping the soot from their faces. They look north. They know the English are marching away. "What shall we do?" Alençon asks the Maid. It is a question of life and death. To chase the English into the open country is to risk everything they have gained. It is to risk another Agincourt. The ghost of that old fear rises up, cold and paralysing. But Joan looks at him, her eyes burning with that strange, terrifying certainty. "Have good spurs," she says. "What? Are we to run away?" someone asks, perhaps hoping for a joke. "No," she replies, and her voice is the sound of a closing door. "It is the English who will not defend themselves. You will need good spurs to catch them." The order goes out. It is a whisper that becomes a shout that becomes a roar. The French army is not stopping. They are not resting. They are leaving the safety of the walls they just captured. They are going to do the one thing French armies are never supposed to do. They are going to hunt the English lion in the wild. The men look at each other. They check their saddle girths. They tighten their helmet straps. There is a nervous energy, a vibration in the air that feels like electricity. They are breaking the rules. They are stepping off the map of known safety and into the terra incognita of total war. The sun is high and hot. The road north is open. The dust of the English retreat is still hanging in the air, a long grey finger pointing the way to destiny. The French vanguard, the heavy cavalry, begins to muster. They are not marching in a parade. They are moving with the predatory grace of wolves who have smelled a wounded animal. The siege of Beaugency is over, but the Battle of Patay is about to begin, and it will not be fought with stone and powder, but with speed, sweat, and the terrible silence of the open plains. The army of France is no longer a single, sluggish beast dragging its belly across the map. It is shedding its skin, transforming into something leaner, faster, and infinitely more dangerous. The heavy infantry, the slow-moving culverins, and the baggage wagons are left behind at Beaugency or trailing in the wake, choking on the dust of those who have gone ahead. The decision has been made, and now the execution falls to the vanguard. This is not the vanguard of a parade, a group of men walking tall with polished buttons. This is the avant-garde, the iron tip of the spear, composed of roughly 1,500 of the finest, hardest riding armoured cavalry in the kingdom. They detach from the main body with a sound like a landslide, a sudden, thundering separation of hooves and purpose. Leading them are two men who seem carved from the very bedrock of the 100 Years' War. Etienne de Vignolles, known universally as La Hire, and his constant companion, Poton de Saint-Traille. To understand the ferocity of this pursuit, you must look at La Hire. He is not a courtier. He does not wear silk unless he has stolen it. He is a Gascon, a man of the south, with a face that looks like it has been used to hammer nails, and a voice that sounds like grinding millstones. His nickname, La Hire, is often translated as the Wrath or the Prickle, a nod to his prickly disposition and his tendency to be as comfortable to handle as a furious hedgehog. He is a brigand, a mercenary, a man who has spent years burning villages and looting caravans when the king couldn't pay him, which was often, but he is also a patriot in his own blood-soaked way. There is a famous story, perhaps apocryphal, but emotionally true, where La Hire prays before battle. God, I pray you do for La Hire what La Hire would do for you if you were a captain and I were God. It is the prayer of a man who treats the Almighty as a fellow soldier, a professional courtesy between warriors. And right now La Hire is not praying, he is hunting. Beside him rides Poton. More refined perhaps, but no less deadly. They are the eyes and the teeth of the army. They ride north, away from the river, pushing their horses hard. The landscape here changes. We are entering the Beauce, the great granary of France. It is a vast flat limestone plateau, an ocean of wheat and barley that stretches to the horizon in every direction. In the shimmering heat of June, the fields are a blinding gold, the stalks tall and heavy with grain, rustling in the wind like dry paper. It is beautiful, but for a soldier, it is terrifying. There is no cover here, no hills to hide behind, no forests to mask a flank. It is a billiard table of war, where everything is visible and yet, paradoxically, everything is hidden. An army can vanish into the slight depressions of the land or be obscured by the sheer scale of the open sky. The French scouts fan out, riding in small groups, their lances held low to avoid silhouetting themselves against the bright blue dome above. They are looking for the tail of the dragon, the English rearguard. They know Talbot and Fastolf are ahead of them, moving north toward Janville, trying to reach the safety of the forests that lie beyond the plain. The distance between the hunter and the hunted is closing. Historians still argue about the exact gap between the two forces. Was it 5 miles? 10? Some chronicles suggest the French were so close they could smell the English cooking fires. Others say they were navigating purely by the tracks left in the soft earth. But what is certain is the psychological pressure. For 100 years, French cavalry has ridden into the Beauce with fear in their throats, knowing that English archers love this open ground. The flat terrain is perfect for the longbow. It offers long lines of sight and no obstacles to break the flight of an arrow. To ride here is to ride into the teeth of the myth. But La Hire does not care about myths. He cares about speed. He pushes the vanguard to a trot, then a canter. The horses are sweating, their flanks heaving, white foam gathering at the bit. The men in the saddles are encased in plate armour, effectively wearing solar ovens. The heat inside a helmet in June can reach temperatures that cook the brain, causing hallucinations and heat stroke. Sweat runs into their eyes, stinging and blinding, but they do not stop to wipe it away. They drink wine from skins without slowing down, passing the boater bags from saddle to saddle. There is a grim silence among them. They are not singing, they are not boasting, they are listening. They are listening for the telltale sounds of the enemy. The creak of a wagon axle, the bray of a mule, the heavy rhythmic tramp of iron boots. The logic of the pursuit is brutal. If the English are allowed to reach a defensive position, a hedge, a village, a line of trees, they will stop, turn, and build their fortress of stakes. Then the French will have to charge them, and they will die. That is the script. The only way to rewrite the ending is to catch them while they are moving, to catch them naked. The French captains know this. Joan has told them, ride them down. It is a simple instruction, but it carries the weight of a revolution. She has given them permission to abandon the chivalric code of formal battle lines and embrace the chaotic, messy reality of a street fight. As the miles roll by under their hooves, a strange thing begins to happen to the men of the vanguard. The fear that has dogged them for years begins to evaporate, replaced by a cold, predatory focus. They are the wolves now. They look at the tracks in the dust, thousands of footprints, deep ruts from the heavy supply wagons, and they see not an invincible machine, but a fleeing animal. The English are running. The thought is intoxicating. It is a drug stronger than the wine. The English are running. The great Talbot, the careful Fastolf, they are looking over their shoulders. This realization ripples through the ranks of the cavalry like a shiver. It tightens their grip on the lance. It makes them spur their horses just a little harder. The sun climbs to its zenith, beating down on the golden ocean of the Beauce. The air shimmers. Heat hazes distort the horizon, turning distant trees into floating islands. And somewhere ahead, in that blur of light and dust, is the English army. They are marching in good order, disciplined and dangerous, unaware that the distance is shrinking with every heartbeat. La Hire signals to his lieutenants. They spread wider, casting a net across the plain. They are not just following, they are corralling. They are cutting off the angles. They are ensuring that when the trap snaps shut, there will be no way out. This ride north is the silent prelude to the storm. It is the drawing of the breath before the scream. The French vanguard is a ghost in the daylight, a shimmer of steel moving through the wheat, driven by a hunger that has been starving for 3 generations. They are riding out of the pages of a history book that said they were losers, and into a new chapter that they are riding with every hoofbeat. The ground trembles slightly, a vibration that travels through the earth, a warning that the English, in their heavy boots, cannot feel. But the deer in the fields feel it. The birds in the high grass feel it. Something is coming, something unstoppable. The hunt is on, and the hunters have forgotten how to be afraid. The sun is no longer a celestial body. It has become a physical weight, a heavy golden hand pressing down on the flat expanse of the boat until the world feels flattened and breathless. It is mid-afternoon on the 18th of June, 1429, and the heat is a living thing, a shimmering distortion that rises from the limestone earth and turns the air into a kiln. To understand the Battle of Patay, you must first feel this heat in your bones, for it is the silent, suffocating partner in the dance of death that is about to begin. The Beauce is often called the Ocean of Wheat, for a reason. It stretches out in every direction, a vast monotonous table of yellow and green, unbroken by hedges, walls, or significant hills. It is a landscape of terrible exposure. There is no shade here, no cool forests to offer sanctuary, only the relentless, unblinking eye of the sun and the dry rustle of stalks brushing against steel. For the English army marching north, this geography is both a blessing and a curse. On one hand, it is perfect for their way of war, long sight lines for the archers, firm ground for the men-at-arms to stand their ground. But on the other hand, it offers no place to hide. They are a dark stain moving across a golden canvas, visible for miles to anyone with keen eyes and a fast horse. The soldiers are suffering. Imagine, if you can, the reality of marching in the 15th century. These men are not wearing the lightweight, breathable fabrics of modern hiking gear. They are encased in layers of wool, linen, leather, and iron. The English archer, the backbone of this force, wears a thick padded jack or gambeson, essentially a heavy quilt designed to absorb the shock of a sword blow. In winter, it is warm and comforting. In the high heat of a French summer, it is a personal sauna that traps every drop of sweat against the skin. He carries his yew-bow, which is unstrung to keep the wood from losing its snap in the heat, and a sheaf of arrows that rattles at his hip. But heaviest of all is the stake. Every archer is required to carry a 6-foot glistening pole of sharpened hardwood, the portable fortification that is the key to their tactical doctrine. It weighs perhaps 10 pounds, maybe more, and after 10 miles of marching through dust and heat, it feels like a cross. The men-at-arms and knights have it worse. They are sealed inside plate armour, steel suits that absorb the solar radiation until they are hot to the touch. To touch a knight's pauldron now would be to burn your hand. Inside, the air is stale and hot, recycling the smell of sweat, old garlic, and anxiety. They march with their visors up, gasping for the dry, dusty air, their faces flushed red, their hair matted against their skulls. Water is scarce. The canteens and wineskins are running low, and the lukewarm liquid they contain offers little relief. There is a saying among soldiers that an army marches on its stomach, but today this army is marching on its thirst. Historians often debate how much armour was actually worn on the march versus carried in wagons. Common sense suggests they would strip down to the basics, but the fear of the French vanguard is so acute, so present, that many keep their protection on, terrified of being caught naked by a sudden charge. It is a gamble. Risk heat stroke or risk an arrow in the lung. Most choose the heat stroke. The column moves with a disciplined rhythmic tramping that kicks up a fine choking dust. This dust coats everything, eyelashes, lips, the fletching of arrows, turning the army into a spectral procession of grey statues. Talbot and Fastolf ride near the rear and the centre, their eyes scanning the shimmering horizon. They are arguing again, or perhaps just sharing a tense, unspoken understanding. They know the French are behind them. They can feel the pressure of the pursuit, like a physical itch between the shoulder blades. They want to reach the safety of the wooded country near Janville, where the terrain breaks up and offers defensive positions that don't require digging into this rock-hard clay. The ground of the Beauce is baked solid. To drive a stake into this earth will require mallets and muscle, and time they might not have. Talbot, ever the aggressor, likely chafes at this retreat. He is a man who prefers to dictate the terms of engagement, not run from them. He looks at the sun, calculating the hours left of daylight, calculating the miles to safety. He is a lion forced to act like a gazelle, and it sits poorly with his digestion. Meanwhile, the French vanguard, led by La Hire and Poton, is cutting through the wheat like a scythe. They are also hot, also thirsty, but they are riding on the high of the hunt. There is a psychological cooling effect to being the predator rather than the prey. They spread out in a wide arc, a net of horseflesh and steel cast across the plain. They are not marching in a column. They are moving in small fluid groups, communicating with hand signals and whistles to avoid alerting the English. The wheat is tall enough to hide a crouching man, but not a horseman, so they ride low, using the slight undulations of the terrain, the swells in the ocean of grain, to mask their approach. They are looking for the dust cloud. In this landscape, dust is the primary form of intelligence. A large cloud means the main body. A small, fast-moving cloud means scouts. The French see the English dust long before they see the English banners. It rises like a column of smoke from a distant fire, marking the enemy's position with a fatal precision. The French captains rein in their horses, watching the grey smudge against the blue sky. They check their girths again. They drink the last of their water. They know they are close. The silence of the Beauce is deceptive. It seems empty, save for the chirping of crickets and the song of larks high above, indifferent to the machinations of kings. But the air is thick with the static of imminent violence. There is a moment of profound sensory dissonance here. The world is bright, beautiful, and golden. The poppies are blooming red in the wheat, little splashes of colour that look like blood spatter before the first wound is even dealt. It is the kind of day that should be used for a picnic, for lying on a blanket and watching the clouds drift by, perhaps with a nice wheel of brie and a nap. Instead, thousands of men are trudging through the heat, their bodies aching, their minds focused on the grim mechanics of slaughter. The English archers shift the weight of their stakes from one shoulder to the other, grumbling in that unique, colourful dialect of the tired infantrymen, complaining about the French, the heat, the lack of ale, and the questionable parentage of their sergeants. A bit of humour, dry as the dust, passes through the ranks. "If I die here," one might wheeze, "bury me in a tavern, not a church, so I can finally get a drink." It is a small spark of humanity in a grinding machine, but the laughter is short-lived. The rearguard, commanded by heavy-set veterans who have seen it all, keeps looking back. They can see the shimmer of heat haze. But is there something else? A glint of metal? A movement that doesn't match the wind in the wheat? The paranoia of the pursued is a heavy burden. Every shadow looks like a French knight. Every rustle sounds like a charge. The distance between the two armies has shrunk to almost nothing. The English are marching toward the village of Patay, a small cluster of houses and a church tower that promises a brief respite, a landmark in the endless sea of grain. They do not know that Patay will not be a resting place, but a tombstone. They do not know that the French scouts are already flanking them, moving parallel to their line of march, hidden by the very vastness of the landscape that was supposed to protect them. The trap is not a fixed thing, it is a moving box, closing in from the sides. The heat continues to build, baking the earth into a hard, unforgiving anvil. The English are the iron, hot and malleable. The French are the hammer, poised to strike. And holding it all together is the silence, the terrible heavy silence of a summer afternoon where the only sound is the heartbeat of history, slowing down, waiting for the signal that will stop it forever. The stage is fully set. The actors are in place. The audience of ghosts is watching. All that is needed now is a catalyst, a single random spark to ignite the powder keg that the heat has so carefully dried. We move now into the heart of the English column, drifting down from the wide, uncaring sky to walk among the men who are marching into history. Listen, can you hear the rhythm? It is a heavy hypnotic sound, a grinding ostinato of iron-shod boots on hard-packed earth, the clatter of scabbards against greaves, the creak of leather straps straining under the weight of equipment. Tramp, tramp, tramp. It is the heartbeat of a beast made of 5,000 men. This is the English army on the move, and even in retreat, it possesses a terrifying, disciplined beauty. They do not march as a mob. They move with the intricate, internalized order of a machine that has been running for 100 years. At the very front, riding with the vanguard, is the Earl of Shrewsbury, John Talbot. He is the eyes of the beast. He scans the horizon with a gaze that is both predatory and protective, looking for two things, a place to fight and a place to sleep. He knows the French are behind them. He can feel their presence like a drop in barometric pressure before a storm, but he does not know exactly where. In his mind, the French are still playing by the old rules. He expects them to appear, to posture, to blow trumpets, and to give him time to form his line. That is how civilized wars are fought. He does not know that he is being hunted by men who have discarded the rulebook. Behind him stretches the main battle, the solid, muscular torso of the army, commanded by Sir John Fastolf. Here, the bulk of the archers march. These are the yeomen, the sons of English soil who carry the longbows that have conquered a kingdom. They walk with a rolling, loose-limbed gait, their bows in canvas cases to protect them from the dust, their helmets tipping forward to shield their eyes from the glare. They are tired. The heat of the bows is relentless, a silent enemy that saps the strength from their legs and dries the moisture in their throats. They pass a wineskin down the line, a warm, sour vintage liberated from a cellar in Meung, and share a grim joke. At least the French sun is free, one might mutter, wiping sweat from a beard thick with grey dust, though I'd trade it all for a wet English fog right now. A ripple of low laughter moves through the ranks, a small human warmth in the midst of the steel. Bringing up the rear is the rearguard, the tail of the dragon. These are the men most on edge. They walk backward as often as forward, squinting into the shimmering heat haze that obscures the road behind them. They are the ones who will feel the first bite of the enemy if he strikes. They see shapes in the dust. Was that a horseman? Was that a lance tip catching the sun? Or just a trick of the light? The tension here is palpable, a tight wire vibrating in the silence. Historians often debate the exact composition of this column. Was it truly an army of 5,000, or perhaps fewer, depleted by the garrisons left behind? And more importantly, how many of them were archers? The traditional ratio was 3 archers to 1 man at arms, a balance that favoured defensive firepower over shock action. If this ratio held true, then the column was a walking porcupine of arrows, deadly if it could stop and bristle, but vulnerable while moving. The debate is academic now, but for Fastolf, riding in the centre, it was a matter of life and death. He knew that his archers were the key. Without them, the knights were just heavy metal statues. With them, they were invincible. As the afternoon wears on, the terrain begins to change slightly. The endless, flat table of the Beauce is broken by small undulations, dips and rises that offer a modicum of tactical advantage. To the left and right, thick hedges and lines of scrub brush appear, the bocage that would become so famous in later wars, but here serves as a potential anchor for a battle line. Talbot sees this. He sees the village of Patay ahead, a cluster of thatched roofs and a sturdy stone church rising like a beacon. Halt! The command is not shouted, it is passed down the line, a wave of sound that travels from the vanguard to the rear. Halt, halt, stand fast. The rhythm of the march breaks, the grinding stops. The silence that rushes in to fill the void is sudden and immense. The dust begins to settle, revealing the tired, sunburned faces of the men. They lean on their pikes. They lower their heavy shields. They look at the village of Patay and think, here, we will rest here. Talbot and Fastolf meet near the front. They look at the ground. It is good ground. There are hedges to protect the flanks. There is a gentle slope. If the French come, they can form up here. They can drive their stakes into the earth, line up the archers behind the hedges, and recreate the slaughter of Agincourt. It feels familiar. It feels safe. The strategic logic is sound. Stop, prepare, and let the enemy break themselves against your wall. We will make our stand here if they press us. Talbot decides, his voice raspy with dust. Let the men deploy. And so, the fatal mistake begins. Not a mistake of cowardice, or even of incompetence, but a mistake of assumption. They assume they have the one thing the French have already stolen from them: time. The English army begins the slow, cumbersome process of transforming from a marching column into a battle line. It is a complex choreography. Archers must move to the wings. Men-at-arms must move to the centre. Supply wagons must be circled. It takes hours to do properly. They have perhaps minutes. The soldiers, grateful for the pause, begin to unbuckle their gear. Some sit down in the grass, chewing on hardtack or nursing their aching feet. They believe the day's marching is done. They believe the danger is still a hypothetical cloud on the horizon. They do not see the French scouts, La Hire's riders, who are at this very moment cresting a low rise just a mile to the south, peering through the wheat stalks with eyes that are wide with disbelief. The English are stopping. They are not in battle formation. They are cluttered, disorganized, and relaxed. It is the moment a predator dreams of. The prey has stopped to graze, but the English do not know this. They are wrapped in the comforting illusion of their own competence. They are the victors of 100 battles. They are the masters of France. Why should they hurry? They begin to drive the first stakes, the shink-shink of metal hammers on wood ringing out in the quiet air. It is a domestic sound, almost like building a fence for a garden. It signifies ownership. This ground is ours, the sound says. Come and take it. But nature has a way of intervening in the plans of men, often with the smallest of agents. As the English settle in, unaware of the sword hanging over their heads, the world around them holds its breath. The heat presses down. The insects buzz in the tall grass. And in a small copse of trees near the English right flank, a stag, a magnificent terrified creature with a crown of antlers, lifts its head. It smells the men. It smells the horses. And it smells something else. Something sharp and metallic that drifts on the wind from the south. It is the scent of the hunter. The stage is set for the spark. The English are a pile of dry tinder, confident that no fire can touch them. The French are the flint, striking hard against the steel of history, and in the middle, innocently grazing on the leaves of a hawthorn bush, is the deer that will decide the fate of nations. The halt is a physical mercy, a sudden cessation of the pounding rhythm that has vibrated through the soles of 5,000 pairs of boots since sunrise. The order to stop ripples down the column like a cool breeze, and you can almost hear the collective sigh of the English army, a sound composed of exhaled breath, creaking leather, and the clattering of heavy shields being lowered to the dry, yellow grass. They are near the village of Patay, a modest collection of stone and thatch that sits quietly amidst the rolling ocean of the Beauce. To the soldiers, it is just a name on a map, a place to water the horses and perhaps find a bit of shade, but to the commanders it is a canvas. Lord Talbot rides up and down the line, his eyes narrowing as he reads the landscape. He sees what a civilian would miss: the subtle dip in the ground that can hide a reserve force, the thick, thorny hedges that line the old Roman road, the way the terrain funnels approaches into a killing zone. To Talbot, this is not a farm. It is a fortress, waiting to be built. He nods to his lieutenants. "Here," he seems to say, "we will break them here." The English begin the ritual of the defence. It is a slow, deliberate process, honed by a century of practice. They are not merely stopping, they are transforming the geography. The archers, the famous yeomen of England, step forward. They are the architects of this trap. Each man carries his stake, that 6-foot pole of sharpened hardwood, double-pointed so it can be driven into the earth and still present a wicked, angled tip to a charging horse. They begin to line up behind the hedges, seeking the softest ground to plant their walls. But the ground here is hard, baked by the relentless June sun into a substance more like pottery than soil. Thud, 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 the mallets swing. The men grunt with effort, sweat dripping from their noses, stinging their eyes. It is hard work, this business of staying alive. They curse the French sun. They curse the hard French dirt, and they curse the French in general, with that specific creative profanity that soldiers have elevated to an art form. There is a dark, ironic humour in this scene. The English are preparing for a battle that exists only in their minds, a battle where the French will appear on the horizon, blow their trumpets, wait for the English to finish their lunch and their fortifications, and then charge politely into the arrows. It is a comforting fiction. They do not know that the war has changed. They are like men setting up a chessboard while their opponent is already swinging a sledgehammer at the table. Fastolf, ever the prudent manager, is less sanguine than Talbot. He rides near the rear, checking the baggage train, ensuring the wagons are circled to form a laager, a wooden island of safety for the pages and the wounded. He looks south, back the way they came. The heat haze shimmers, distorting the view. Is that dust? Or just the wind playing tricks on tired eyes? He feels a prickle of unease, the instinct of a man who knows that silence in war is rarely empty. Historians often debate exactly how much of the English line was formed when the blow fell. Some chronicles suggest they were fully deployed. Others argue they were caught completely unawares, in disarray. The truth, as it often does, likely lies in the messy middle. The vanguard under Talbot is ready, their stakes planted, their bows strung. They are the teeth of the trap. But the main body and the rearguard are still moving, still shuffling into position, a dragon that is half asleep and half awake. The archers in the rear are not ready. Their stakes are still on their shoulders or lying in the grass. They are drinking water, loosening their belts, perhaps stealing a moment to close their eyes against the glare. They are vulnerable, exposed, and tragically confident. The landscape of Patay is deceptive. It is not perfectly flat, but composed of shallow depressions and low ridges, swales in the old tongue. These dips are deep enough to hide a man on a horse if he crouches low. The French scouts, Lahir's wolves, are using these swales now. They are creeping closer, moving through the dead ground, where the English line of sight is broken. They are so close that if the wind were blowing the other way, the English might smell the sweat of the French horses. But the wind is still, the air stagnant and heavy. The English continue their work, unaware that they are being watched. There is a strange intimacy to this moment. We are seeing the English army in its domestic state. A squire tightens a strap on a knight's saddle. A cook stirs a pot of pottage. that will never be eaten, a group of archers shares a joke about a girl in Rouen. These are not faceless invaders. They are men with mothers, with debts, with dreams of owning a small plot of land in unparalleled dampness back in Shropshire. They believe in their invincibility because it is the only thing that keeps the terror at bay. They look at the stakes they are planting, those simple wooden sticks, and see a magic circle that no French knight can cross. It is a faith as strong as any religion. Talbot is satisfied. He has chosen his ground well. The hedges will break up the enemy charge. The narrow lane will funnel them. The archers will do the rest. He imagines the victory already. The prisoners he will ransom. The glory he will send back to the boy king Henry VI in London. He is a man writing his own legend in his head, editing out the possibility of defeat. He does not see the flaw in his plan. The flaw is not in the ground, or the men, or the weapons. The flaw is in the assumption of time. He assumes the French are still miles away, marching to the beat of the old drum. He does not know that the French are currently rewriting the sheet music. As the shadows begin to lengthen ever so slightly, a peculiar calm settles over the English position. The chaotic noise of the halt, the shouting sergeants, the clattering wagons, begins to fade into a focused hum of activity. It is the sound of a machine idling. The trap that wasn't is almost set. The stakes are angled. The bows are ready. The trap is beautiful in its lethality. But a trap is useless if the prey attacks the hunter before the spring is wound. And here, in this fragile bubble of preparation, nature prepares its own intervention. We must look away from the soldiers now, away from the sweating men and the heavy horses, to a small patch of woodland just to the side of the English column. It is cool and dark under the trees. The air smells of pine and damp earth, a stark contrast to the dusty furnace of the road. Inside this green sanctuary, a stag is grazing. He is a magnificent animal, a king of the forest, with a crown of velvet antlers. He has watched the noisy, smelly two-legged creatures pass by with the wary indifference of his kind. He does not care about the claims of Valois or Plantagenet. He cares about the tender shoots of grass and the safety of the shadows. But the noise is getting closer. The vibrations in the earth are changing. Something is approaching from the south, something fast and heavy that shakes the ground like thunder. The stag lifts his head. His ears twitch. His nostrils flare. The ancient instinct of flight triggers in his muscles. He is the wild card. He is the chaos theory of history wrapped in fur and muscle. He does not know that he is about to become the most famous animal in the 100 Years' War. He only knows that he is afraid. And fear, as the English are about to learn, is a contagious thing. The trap is set, but the trigger is not what anyone expects. The world holds its breath one last time. The archers wipe their brows. Talbot scans the empty horizon. And in the woods the stag tenses his legs, preparing to run straight into the pages of history. The silence of the Beauce is a heavy physical thing, a blanket of heat and hushed breath that smothers the landscape, broken only by the dry rasp of cicadas and the occasional clink of metal on metal as a soldier shifts his weight. We are suspended in the fragile, terrifying moment between the lightning and the thunder. The English army is a coiled spring, partly unwound, resting near the village of Patay, while the French vanguard prowls the gentle depressions of the terrain like wolves scenting the wind. They are close, terrifyingly close, yet neither side truly sees the other. The topography of the region, with its shallow swales and clusters of woodland, creates a deadly game of blind man's bluff. The French scouts, led by the sharp-eyed Poton de Saint-Traille, are riding hard, their horses chest-deep in the wheat, their eyes straining against the glare of the sun. They know the English are near. They can feel it in the vibrations of the earth, in the unnatural stillness of the birds. But they need a target. To charge blindly into this vastness is to invite disaster. To miss the English column would be to expose their own flank to a counterattack. They need a sign, and destiny, with a sense of humour that is both cruel and poetic, decides to provide one in the form of a startled animal. We must focus now on the small patch of woodland that borders the English position. It is a dense tangle of scrub oak and hawthorn, a darker island in the sea of gold. Inside, the stag we observed earlier is freezing, his muscles bunched, his wide, dark eyes reflecting the green shadows. He hears the heavy, rhythmic thudding of the French horses approaching from the south. He smells the sharp, acrid scent of human sweat and horse lather. Panic, cold and absolute, floods his veins. He cannot stay. The woods are no longer a sanctuary. They are a trap. With a sudden, explosive burst of energy, the stag breaks cover. He does not run away from the armies. In his confusion, he bolts straight into the open ground that separates the French scouts from the English lines. He is a streak of russet and white, a desperate living arrow flying across the gap. He crashes through the brush and bursts into the English position right amongst the archers of the rearguard. Imagine the scene. These are men who have been marching for hours in the brutal heat. They are tired, thirsty, and bored. Their discipline is the discipline of the drill square, but their instincts are the instincts of the English countryside. They are poachers, hunters, men who grew up chasing game in the royal forests, mostly illegally. When they see the stag, a magnificent prize, a walking feast of fresh venison, they forget where they are. They forget the French. They forget the war. For a split second, they are just men seeing a deer. A great shout goes up from the ranks. It is the view halloo, the traditional hunting cry, a roar of excitement and surprise that rips through to the silence like a tearing canvas. Huzzah! Look at him go! Get him! The shout travels down the line, a wave of noise that defies all military logic. It is a moment of pure, unadulterated human folly. Historical chronicles, including the detailed accounts of Monstrelet, insist this event actually happened, though modern historians sometimes wonder if it is a convenient literary device to explain the sudden discovery. Yet, it fits the psychology of the English army perfectly, a force so confident, so arrogant in its security that it allows itself to play at hunting while standing in the jaws of death. That shout is the most expensive noise in English military history. It carries. The sound waves travel across the few hundred yards of open ground, bouncing off the hard earth, cutting through the wheat. To the south, Poton de Xaintrailles and his scouts rein in their horses. They freeze. They hear it. Not the vague rumble of a march, but human voices. Distinct, loud English voices. The direction is unmistakable. Poton looks at his lieutenant. He points. There is no need for words. The fog of war has lifted in an instant. The position of the English rearguard is revealed not by a scout's eyes, but by their own mouths. The French now know exactly where the enemy is. They know the English are not formed up in a battle line. For men in a shield wall do not cheer at deer. They are relaxed. They are vulnerable. The calculation in Poton's mind changes instantly from search to destroy. He signals the vanguard. The pace changes. The stealthy trot becomes a gallop. The silence is gone, replaced by the thunder of hooves. Back in the English lines, the shout dies down. The deer vanishes into the distance, likely the only winner of the day. The sergeants bark at the men to settle down, perhaps cuffing a few ears for the breach of discipline. Quiet, you lot. Keep your eyes open. But it is too late. The damage is done. The echo of that shout hangs in the air, a ghost that cannot be put back in the bottle. Talbot, riding near the front, likely does not hear the specific shout, but he senses the shift in the atmosphere. The birds have stopped singing entirely. The ground is trembling. The English archers in the rear, still chuckling about the deer, suddenly look up. The wheat in front of them is moving, not waving in the wind, but parting, being trampled, and then they hear it. Not a hunting cry, but a war cry. Montjoie! Saint-Denis! It is a sound that is usually meant a target-rich environment for English longbows. But this time it sounds different. It sounds closer. It sounds faster. The realization hits the English commanders like a physical blow. They have been found, and they are not ready. The stag has played its part, a divine messenger of chaos, and now the real hunt begins. But the roles have reversed. The English, the masters of the hunt, are now the quarry. The French, the eternal prey, have become the hounds. The air seems to crackle with the sudden release of tension. The archers scramble for their bows, which are lying on the grass or leaned against wagons. They reach for their stakes, those heavy wooden poles that are their only defence against cavalry. But the ground is hard, the mallets are heavy, and the thundering noise approaching through the wheat is getting louder with every heartbeat. It is the sound of 1,500 armoured horses moving at full speed, a kinetic avalanche of steel and muscle that does not care about hunting etiquette. The cry of the stag marks the psychological tipping point of the 100 Years' War. It is the moment when the English lose the initiative, never to fully regain it. It is the moment when a bit of fun turns into a massacre. The irony is suffocating. An army destroyed because it could not resist cheering for a deer. As the French cavalry bursts into view, cresting the low ridge that had hidden them, the English soldiers freeze for a microsecond, their mouths open, the laughter dying in their throats. They see the white banners, they see the lowered lances, they see the end of their world rushing toward them. And in that frozen silence, before the collision, the only sound that remains is the phantom echo of their own foolish shout, ringing in their ears like a death knell. The game is over. The slaughter is about to begin. The sound of the approaching French cavalry is not yet a roar. It is a low, vibrating hum in the earth, like a giant clearing its throat miles underground. But for the English archers of the main body and rearguard, the sound is deafening because it signifies the end of their world. The shout at the stag has died away, replaced instantly by a frantic, scrambling panic that is all the more terrifying for its silence. Men do not scream when they are truly afraid. They work, they fumble, they pray with their hands. The order comes down the line, screamed by sergeants whose faces have gone as pale as the linen coifs under their helmets. Stakes! Plant stakes! Form line! Now! It is the drill they have practiced 1,000 times on village greens in England and muddy fields in Normandy. Step 1, unship the stake. Step 2, place the point. Step 3, drive it home. It is a simple mechanical action that has saved England for 3 generations, but today the mechanics are broken. The ground of the Beauce, baked by weeks of relentless June sun, is no longer soil. It is a substance closer to concrete or fired pottery. The archers, their hearts hammering against their ribs like trapped birds, slam their heavy lead-tipped mallets down onto the tops of the stakes. Clack! The sound is wrong. It is sharp, brittle, and high-pitched, not the dull, satisfying thud of wood biting into soft earth. The stakes bounce, they skid, they do not penetrate. A young archer, perhaps 18, his face smeared with dust and sweat, swings again. Clack, the stake goes in an inch, maybe 2. It wobbles drunkenly. He knows, with a sick feeling in his gut, that 1,000-pound warhorse hitting this stake will not be impaled. It will simply knock the wood aside like a twig. He swings again, desperation lending strength to his arm, but the earth refuses to yield. It is as if the land of France itself has finally decided to fight back, hardening its skin against the invaders. All down the line, the scene repeats. Men are cursing, weeping, throwing their weight onto the shafts, trying to use their own bodies to anchor the wood. But there is no time. The English system, that terrifyingly efficient machine of stakes and bows, relies on one crucial variable: the ability to create a static fortress. Without the stakes, the archer is just a man in a cloth jacket, holding a piece of bent wood. He is not a soldier, he is a victim. The veterans know this. They look at their wobbly, shallow stakes, and then they look at the horizon. The dust cloud is growing. The glint of lance tips is becoming a solid wall of steel. They know the equation: force equals mass times acceleration, and the French have all the mass and all the acceleration. Lord Talbot, commanding the vanguard, is in a better position. His men, having arrived first, had time to prepare. Their stakes are deeper, their lines tighter, but he looks back and sees the chaos unfolding behind him. The main body under Fastolf and the rearguard are not linking up. They are fragmented. The Harrison, the hedgehog formation, is full of holes. It is a fence with no posts. Talbot shouts orders to his trumpeters, trying to coordinate a defence, but the air is thick with the noise of panic. The cohesion that has always been the hallmark of English armies is dissolving. The different sections of the column are acting like separate organisms, each trying to survive, rather than parts of a single body. The vanguard is ready to fight, the rear is still trying to figure out where to stand. And then there is the psychological collapse. For 100 years, the English archer has believed he is invincible. He's been told that the French are cowards who will run into his arrows like obedient sheep. But the sheep are not cooperating. They are coming fast, and they are not stopping to let him get ready. This sudden inversion of the natural order is paralyzing. Hands that could loose 12 arrows a minute suddenly feel like they are made of lead. Bowstrings, usually checked and rechecked, are fumbled. Arrows are dropped in the dust. The muscle memory is there, but the mind is short-circuiting. The myth of Agincourt, which has sustained them for so long, is evaporating in the heat. They realize with a jolt of horror that Agincourt was a battle fought in mud, where the French floundered and slowed. Here, on the hard, dry ground of Patay, the French horses will not slow down. They will speed up. The very terrain that makes it impossible to plant stakes makes it perfect for a cavalry charge. It is a cruel, geometric irony. Fastolf, watching from the centre, sees the disaster unfolding with the cold clarity of a logistician. He sees the gaps. He sees the archers struggling with the ground. He sees the wave of French heavy cavalry, La Hire's vanguard, cresting the rise, no longer trotting, but now at a full gallop. He knows the battle is lost before the first blow is struck. The only question now is how much of the army can be saved. Does he stand and die with the rest? Or does he try to preserve the nucleus of the force? It is a decision that will haunt his reputation for centuries, branding him a coward in the plays of Shakespeare, but in the moment it is a calculation of pure survival. "Hold!" he might shout to his immediate retinue. "Stand fast!" But his eyes are already looking for the exit. The French are now within bowshot, but where is the storm of arrows? Where is the darkening of the sky? A few scattered shots fly out from the English lines, ragged, uncoordinated, desperate. They ping off the curved armour of the French knights, or bury themselves harmlessly in the ground. There is no rhythm. There is no cloud of death. The archers are too busy trying to fix their defences to shoot. They are caught in the fatal trap of trying to do two things at once and doing neither. The French see this. They see the lack of arrows. They see the frantic movement, and they roar. It is a sound of pure, unadulterated triumph. They know the dragon has no teeth. Lahir, riding at the front of the French wave, must be laughing. His prayer has been answered. God has indeed done for Lahir what Lahir would do for God. He has given him an English army with its pants down. The distance closes. 500 yards, 300, 100. The ground shakes so violently that the archers can feel it in their teeth. The unplanted stakes, those pathetic wobbly sticks, stand like mocking tomb markers. Some men drop their mallets and draw their swords, short, useless things against a lance. Others simply turn and run, their nerve breaking under the weight of the oncoming steel. The line, which should be a wall of discipline, buckles. And so, the great collision arrives. It does not happen with the formal grace of a joust, but with the sickening crunch of a car crash. The French cavalry does not stop at the stakes, they ride through them. The wood snaps, the horses chest bump the men-at-arms, sending them flying like rag dolls. The lancers, held steady by armpits of steel, punch through gambesons and mail. The English vanguard, isolated and flanked, is engulfed. The main body is struck before it can even form a square. The rearguard is simply erased. There is no battle, really. There is only an impact. The English system, the tactical doctrine that conquered a kingdom, has failed not because it was wrong, but because it was slow. And in the brutal calculus of 1429, speed is the only god that matters. The moment of impact is not a collision of equals. It is the sound of a tidal wave hitting a picket fence. The French heavy cavalry, leading with the armoured chest of the destrier and the tip of the lance, crashes into the English line with a violence that defies the physics of medieval warfare. Usually, a charge slows as it hits the resistance of stakes and bodies, grinding to a bloody halt. But here, the resistance is a mirage. The stakes fly into the air like kindling, spinning end over end in the dust. The archers, caught in the act of trying to drive their protection into the concrete earth, are simply ridden over. There is no time to draw swords, no time to form a shield wall, no time to even scream before the world becomes a blur of hooves and steel. The English rearguard, the tail of the dragon, is obliterated in seconds. It does not break, it evaporates. The men are scattered like leaves in a gale, trampled into the very ground they failed to fortify. Lahir and Poton de Saint-Treize are in the thick of it, their swords rising and falling with a terrifying rhythmic efficiency. For 20 years, these men have watched their friends die at the end of English arrows. They have watched their king humiliated, their lands burned, their honour stripped away by a weapon they could not reach. Now, the weapon is within arm's reach, and it is helpless. The rage of the French nobility is uncorked. They are not fighting for territory today. They are fighting to erase a memory. They ride through the shattered remnants of the rearguard and slam into the main body of the English army with undiminished momentum. The sheer kinetic energy of 1,500 armoured horsemen moving at 30 miles per hour is a weapon in itself. It turns the English formation inside out. Men are thrown backward into their comrades, creating a domino effect of chaos and confusion. The discipline that held the line at Agincourt is gone, replaced by the primal instinct to survive. The English archers, realising their bows are useless at this range, drop them. They reach for their heavy mauls, their daggers, anything to fend off the armoured giants looming over them. But a man in a quilted jacket with a hammer is no match for a knight in Milanese plate. It is a slaughter. The slaughter of the innocent, some chroniclers might call it, if the English were innocent. Instead, it is the slaughter of the arrogant. The French knights are laughing, a terrible breathless sound inside their helmets, as they realise the truth. The English are just men. They bleed like men. They die like men. The supernatural aura of invincibility that has protected them for so long was just a trick of the light, a shadow puppet show that terrified a generation. Now the lights are on, and the puppets are tangled in their own strings. In the vanguard, Lord Talbot fights with the desperate fury of a cornered lion. He has managed to form a rough line, his men-at-arms standing shoulder to shoulder, presenting a hedge of steel to the enemy, but he is cut off. The French cavalry has swirled around his flanks like water around a rock. He is an island in a sea of enemies. He shouts orders, rallying his men to the standard, invoking St. George and the King. Stand fast, for England, hold the line. But St. George seems to have taken the day off, or perhaps he is busy filing a complaint about the working conditions. The French are not attacking him from the front, where his strength lies. They are attacking him from everywhere. They are attacking his mind. Talbot sees the collapse behind him. He sees the main body disintegrating. He knows, with the sick certainty of a veteran commander, that the battle is already lost. He is fighting now only for honour, or perhaps for a good death. Meanwhile, Sir John Fastolf, commanding the main body, is witnessing the catastrophe from a slightly different perspective. He sees the rearguard vanish. He sees the French knights carving through his own lines. He sees the panic spreading like a contagion, turning disciplined soldiers into a mob. He has a choice to make. It is the hardest choice a commander can face. Does he throw his remaining reserves into the meat grinder, hoping for a miracle that will not come? Does he sacrifice the rest of the army to save Talbot, or does he try to save what can be saved? Fastolf is a pragmatist. He knows that if the entire English field army is destroyed here, there will be nothing left to stop the French from marching on Paris. There will be no garrison for Normandy. The war will be effectively over. He looks at his captains, he looks at the carnage, and he makes the decision that will brand him a coward for centuries. Sound the retreat, he orders. It is a quiet command, almost lost in the din of battle, but it seals the fate of the day. The trumpets of the main body blow the signal to withdraw, but in the chaos of a rout, a withdraw signal is interpreted by the common soldier as run for your lives. The organised retreat Fastolf intends turns instantly into a disorderly flight. The English main body breaks. Men throw down their weapons, their shields, their armour, anything that slows them down. They turn their backs on the French and run north, toward the forests, toward Janville, toward anywhere that isn't here. The cohesion of the army is shattered. The dragon has not only lost its tail, its body has fallen apart. The French see the banners turning. They see the backs of the English jackets, and the bloodlust rises again. They run. The goddams run. The cry goes up, a roar of vindication that shakes the very air. The pursuit begins in earnest. This is where the true horror of medieval warfare lies, not in the clash of lines, but in the chase. A fleeing man is easy prey for a horseman. The French knights, their lances broken, draw their swords and axes. They ride down the fleeing archers, cutting them down as they run. The road to Janville becomes a killing floor. The dust is choked with the bodies of men who, just hours ago, were part of the most feared army in Europe. Now they are just obstacles for the horses to step over. There is a grim irony in the speed of it all. The Battle of Patay is not a day-long struggle. It does not have the ebb and flow of other great battles. It is a spasm of violence. From the moment the stag broke cover to the moment the English broke and ran, perhaps only 10 or 15 minutes have passed. In that quarter of an hour, the strategic balance of the 100 Years' War has tipped irrevocably. The English longbow, the weapon that killed the flower of French chivalry, has not fired a single effective volley. It lies in the dust, trampled and broken, a symbol of a technological superiority that has been rendered obsolete by a tactical failure. Talbot, still fighting in his isolated pocket, sees Fastolf's banner moving away. He sees the main body dissolving. He roars in frustration, swinging his sword with the strength of a man who knows he is doomed. He is surrounded. French knights are pressing in on all sides, eager to claim the prize of the English Achilles. He strikes one down, then another, but there are too many. A blow takes him in the back, another on the helmet. He stumbles. The great Lord Talbot, the terror of France, goes down on one knee. He looks up at the circle of French faces, faces that used to look at him with fear, now looking at him with triumph. He drops his sword. The silence of his surrender is louder than the battle itself. The sun beats down on the field, indifferent to the change in management. The golden wheat is now stained red. The air is thick with the smell of blood and fear. The invincible English army is gone, scattered to the four winds. And in the centre of the carnage, the French knights rein in their horses, chests heaving, struggling to comprehend what they have just done. They have not just won a battle, they have broken a curse. They have looked the monster in the eye and found it mortal. The Battle of Patay is effectively over, but the dying has only just begun. The pursuit will continue until nightfall, hunting down the remnants of the myth in the long shadows of the Beauce. The dust, which has hung over the field like a shroud for the last furious hour, begins to settle, coating the dead and the living in a uniform ghostly grey. The roar of the battle, that terrible singular noise of steel on steel and men screaming, has fragmented into individual sounds of pain and triumph. We are walking now among the wreckage of a myth. The Battle of Patay is technically over, but the dismantling of the English war machine is just beginning. In the centre of the carnage, where the fighting was fiercest, stands the Earl of Shrewsbury, John Talbot. He is no longer the terrifying Roy Talbot, who haunted French nightmares. He is a battered, exhausted man in dented plate armour, surrounded by a ring of French soldiers who look at him with a mixture of awe and greed. To capture Talbot is like capturing a dragon. The ransom alone will make a man's fortune for life. He has fought until his sword was heavy as lead, until his breath came in ragged gasps, but the tide was simply too strong. History records the moment of his capture with a kind of reverent detail. It is said that he was taken by Poton de Saint-Trais himself, or perhaps by a simple archer who got lucky. The accounts vary, as they always do when legends collide with reality, but the exchange that follows is the stuff of chivalric poetry. When the French commander approaches him, likely wiping English blood from his own sword, Talbot does not beg. He does not rage. He looks at his captor with the stoic acceptance of a professional gambler who has finally drawn a bad hand. "It is the fortune of war," he is reported to have said. It is a simple sentence, but it carries the weight of an epitaph. In that moment, the giant of the English occupation, the man who embodied the aggressive, unconquerable spirit of Henry V, becomes a prisoner. The psychological shock of this cannot be overstated. For the French soldiers watching, seeing Talbot in chains is like seeing gravity stop working. It proves that the laws of their universe have changed, but while one giant falls, another flees. We must turn our gaze to the road leading north, toward Janville. There, riding hard away from the catastrophe, is Sir John Fastolf. He is alive. He has his horse. He has a small contingent of the main body that he managed to pull out of the fire, but he has left something behind on the field of Patay that he will never recover: his honour. To the medieval mind, Fastolf's decision to retreat is a crime worse than death. It is cowardice. The Order of the Garter, the highest chivalric honour in England, will be stripped from him, though later reinstated after much arguing. Shakespeare will later caricature him as the fat, lying Falstaff, cementing his disgrace in literature forever. But modern historians, looking at the cold calculus of the day, often defend him. Scholars still argue whether Falstaff was a coward or the only sane man on the field, one might say. If he had stayed, the entire English army would have been wiped out. By running, he saved a nucleus of veterans who could and did fight another day. It is the eternal tension between the hero who dies uselessly and the pragmatist who lives to be despised. Falstaff rides on, his face burning with shame, listening to the screams of his countrymen fading behind him, and the screams are terrible. The French pursuit is ruthless. For miles along the road, the English archers are hunted down. These are the men who have killed thousands of Frenchmen over the decades. There is no mercy for them. They are cut down in the ditches, in the fields, in the woods where they try to hide. The casualty numbers are staggering. English losses are estimated between 2,000 and 4,000 men, nearly the entire field army. The French losses? A handful, perhaps 100. It is Agincourt in reverse, a mirror image of slaughter that balances the scales of history in a single afternoon. But the true cost of Patay is not just in the number of dead, it is in who died. An English longbowman is not a conscript you can replace in a week. He is a specialist. He begins training at the age of 7. His skeleton deforms under the weight of the draw. Archaeologists have found the skeletons of archers with enlarged left arms and thickened spines. It takes a lifetime to make one of these men. At Patay, England loses a generation of them. They lose the institutional memory, the veteran sergeants who know how to plant stakes, the captains who know how to read the wind. You can buy new armour, you can hire new mercenaries, but you cannot buy 20 years of experience with a yew-bow. That is what dies in the wheat fields of the Beauce. The English system, that terrifying combination of archer and dismounted knight, is broken not because the tactic is flawed, but because the men who make it work are dead. The looting begins as the sun lowers. The French soldiers, high on adrenaline and victory, move among the fallen. They strip the armour from the dead knights. Good Milanese steel is worth a fortune. They take swords, daggers, purses. It is a grim harvest. The bodies of the English, so recently the terrors of the earth, are now just pale, naked forms in the dirt. The giants have been reduced to meat, and amidst this macabre scene, the French commanders, La Hire, Alençon, Dunois, and the Maid, meet. They are covered in dust, sweat, and blood. They look at each other with wild eyes. They have done the impossible. They have not just defeated the English, they have annihilated them. Joan, usually so full of fire, is said to have been moved to pity by the sight of the suffering. There is a story of her comforting a dying English prisoner, holding his head while he confessed his sins. It is a reminder that even in the midst of this geopolitical earthquake, the human cost is intimate and personal. The capture of the other English leaders completes the decapitation of their force. Lord Scales, another legendary commander, is taken. The English leadership structure in the Loire Valley has simply ceased to exist. In London, when the news eventually arrives, it will cause a panic so deep that men will weep in the streets. The invincible army is gone. The bogeyman is dead. The shockwave travels across Europe. From Rome to the Holy Roman Empire, the word goes out, the Maid has won. The English are broken. It changes the diplomatic landscape instantly. Fence-sitting dukes and wavering allies suddenly remember how much they love the King of France. Power, after all, is the ultimate aphrodisiac, and France is suddenly looking very attractive. As twilight falls over Patay, a strange, heavy quiet returns to the land. The cicadas start up again, indifferent to the history that has just happened. The surviving English are marched away in chains. a long, mournful column of defeated men. The dead are left for the local peasants to bury or for the wolves. The giants of the 100 Years' War, the Talbots, the Scales, the veterans of Agincourt, have fallen, and in the silence that follows, a new sound begins to rise. It is not the clash of swords, but the singing of the French soldiers. They sing of Charlemagne, they sing of Roland, they sing of a girl who talks to angels. They are no longer the beaten dogs of Europe. They are the victors. The road to the north, the road to Reims, the road to the coronation of a king is wide open. The barrier that held them back for 90 years has been kicked down. The sun finally dips below the horizon, painting the sky in bruises of purple and red. The Battle of Patay is history. The myth of English invincibility is buried in the same shallow graves as the archers. The night comes, cool and merciful, wrapping the battlefield in darkness. But for France, the long night is over. The dawn that is coming will be the brightest they have seen in a century. The giants are gone. The path is clear, and the maid is ready to finish what she started. The dust of Patay settles into the soil of the Beauce, becoming part of the silent geology of France, but the energy released on that field does not dissipate. It travels north like a shockwave, invisible and irresistible. The road to Reims, the sacred city where kings are made, has been blocked for years by English garrisons and Burgundian hostility. It was a path of iron and fear. But now, after the thunder of the charge and the silence of the fallen archers, the road is open. It is as if a great heavy door has been kicked off its hinges. The army of the Dauphin, which was so recently a collection of ragged, doubtful men, now moves with the inevitability of a glacier. They march not through a landscape of war, but through a landscape of sudden, miraculous surrender. This is known to history as the Bloodless March, a campaign where the primary weapon is not the sword, but the reputation of the maid and the memory of the English defeat. Towns that should have held out for months, Troyes, Chalon-sur-Marne, open their gates at the first sound of the trumpet. At Troyes, where the treaty disinheriting the Dauphin was signed years ago, the garrison prepares to fight. The English captains bluster and threaten, but the citizens look over the walls. They see the army that destroyed Talbot. They see the girl in white armour, and they decide that they are, in fact, very loyal French subjects after all. The gates swing open. The Dauphin rides in, not as a conqueror, but as a returning father. It is a psychological avalanche. The fear that once paralysed France has crossed the lines. Now it is the English and Burgundians who are paralysed. They cannot believe what is happening. The speed of it defies all military logic, but logic died at Patay. This is now a pilgrimage in armour. On the 16th of July, the army arrives at Reims. The city, deep in enemy territory, is the spiritual heart of the kingdom. It is here, in the great cathedral, that Clovis was baptized, that every legitimate king of France has been anointed with the holy oil of the Saint Ampoule. To hold Reims is to hold the soul of the nation. The English know this. They have tried to keep the Dauphin away from it for a decade, but the English are gone, swept away like chaff. The citizens of Reims, terrified that the English might return but awed by the French advance, send a deputation. They offer the keys to the city. The Dauphin, Charles, enters. He is a man who has been called the King of Bourges, a mocking title for a ruler with no kingdom. He has been plagued by doubts about his own legitimacy, whispered rumours about his mother's fidelity. But as he rides through the streets of Reims, the cheers of the people wash over him, cleansing the doubt. He is about to become God's chosen. The morning of July 17th, 1429, breaks clear and bright. The great cathedral of Notre Dame de Reims rises like a mountain of stone and glass. its stained glass windows glowing with the colours of heaven, ruby, sapphire, and gold. Inside, the air is cool and smells of centuries of incense and beeswax. The nave is packed. Knights, nobles, and commoners stand shoulder to shoulder, their differences erased by the magnitude of the moment. The light filters down through the rose window, creating pools of colour on the stone floor. And there, near the altar, stands Joan. She holds her banner, the white standard with the lilies, and the names of Jesus and Mary. She is not in the centre. The centre belongs to the king, but all eyes are on her. She is the architect of this miracle. She stands still, her armour polished, her face perhaps reflecting the exhaustion of the campaign, but also a profound, quiet peace. It had shared in the pain. She would later say of her banner, it was only right that it should share in the honour. The ceremony begins. The Archbishop of Reims, Regnault de Chartres, performs the ancient rites. The holy oil, said to have been brought by a dove from heaven, is produced. It is a moment of supreme theatricality and deep religious power. Charles kneels. The oil touches his forehead, his shoulders, his hands. The crown, a symbol of heavy gold and heavier responsibility, is lifted high. The silence in the cathedral is absolute. It is the silence of a held breath, the silence of history turning a page. Then the crown is lowered, it touches his head, and in that second the Dauphin dies, and Charles VII, King of France, is born. Vive le roi! Vive le roi! The shout begins as a whisper in the choir and explodes into a roar that shakes the dust from the rafters. Trumpets blare, their brass notes soaring up to the vaulted ceiling. Outside, the cannons fire a salute, the smell of gunpowder mixing with the summer air. It is done. The legitimacy of the English claim to the throne is shattered. How can Henry VI be the King of France when God has clearly anointed Charles in the Holy City? The legal arguments, the treaties, the dynastic squabbles, they all pale before the visual reality of the coronation. Patay broke the English body. Reims breaks the English soul. Joan kneels before the king, weeping. Gentle king, she says, now is executed the pleasure of God. It is the summit of her life. She has done what the voices told her to do. She has taken a broken kingdom and made it whole. Historians often debate what she felt in this moment. Was it triumph, relief, or a premonition of the darkness to come? For the tragedy of Joan is that her mission is effectively over, though her war is not. She has saved France, but France will not save her. Yet, in this golden moment, in the light of the cathedral, the future does not matter. There is only the victory. The coronation at Reims is the true end of the campaign that began with the relief of Orléans. In just 3 months, the strategic map of Europe has been redrawn. The English, who seemed invincible in April, are now on the defensive, holding onto their conquests with slipping fingers. The Battle of Patay was the hammer blow that made this possible, the violent prelude to this peaceful apotheosis. It proved that the English could be beaten in the field, and Reims proved that the French could govern. The war will drag on for another 20 years, a slow, grinding expulsion of the invaders, but the outcome is no longer in doubt. The tide has turned. The English are no longer the masters of destiny, they are merely occupiers living on borrowed time. As the ceremony ends and the king processes out into the sunlight, the people of France see something they haven't seen in generations. A future, the long nightmare of the Civil War, the fear of the God dams, the humiliation of Agincourt. It is all receding into the past. It is becoming a story to tell children, a dark chapter that is finally closed. The sun shines on the armour of the knights, on the robes of the bishops, and on the white banner of the peasant girl who listened to the wind. The 100 Years' War is not over on paper, but in the hearts of the people, the victory is already won. The English lion has been tamed. The French lilies are blooming again, and the world, which seemed so fixed and cruel, has proven that it can be changed by courage, by faith, and by the refusal to accept that defeat is inevitable. Now, let the scene in the cathedral fade. The shouts of Vive le Roi drift away, becoming distant echoes in the corridors of time. The bright colours of the stained glass soften, the gold and ruby turning to the gentle greys and blues of twilight. We are leaving the year 1429. We are leaving the heat of the Beauce and the cool stone of Reims. We are drifting back up through the centuries, passing through the veil of history like a swimmer rising to the surface of a calm lake. The heavy armour is lifted from your shoulders. The weight of the sword, the fear of the arrow, the tension of the march, let it all drop away. You are no longer a soldier on a dusty road. You are safe, here, in the quiet of your own space. The war is over. The kings and captains have gone to their rest, sleeping under their marble tombs, their conflicts resolved by the great peace of time. There is no more fighting to be done. The history books are closed. Feel the stillness of the room around you. The air is cool and still. The shadows are friendly. You have walked a long road tonight, from the desperate siege to the open fields, from the clash of steel to the silence of the crown. You have seen how quickly the world can change, how fear can turn to hope in the blink of an eye. Take that hope with you into the dark. Let your breathing slow down. Inhale the quiet, exhale the day. The past is a story we tell to understand the present, but now the story is done. The final page is turned, the candle flickers and goes out, leaving a trail of comforting smoke. There is only the soft velvet dark, wrapping around you like a warm blanket. Sleep now. The world will be there when you wake, but for now you are free to drift in the river of dreams, where there are no battles, only peace, sweet dreams.